The National Science Foundation reported that in 2012, 26% of Americans thought that the Sun orbited the Earth, rather than the Earth orbiting the Sun. While it's a slightly old statistic, the public's scientific knowledge has stayed almost the same for the past decade. So let's explore our solar system and learn some interesting facts along the way. Let's start with the Moon, our closest neighbor. The Moon has a diameter of 2,159 miles at its equator, a little more than 1/4 of the diameter of Earth. The Moon is Earth's only natural satellite, and even though it's our closest neighbor, it's still a long distance away. The Moon is an average of about 238,000 miles from Earth. To put that into perspective, all the planets in the solar system can fit between the Earth and the Moon. Now, since it has an elliptical orbit, the distance can vary about 26,000 miles, which observed from Earth makes the Moon appear different sizes depending on where it is in its orbit. Another interesting fact about the Moon is that it rotates at nearly the same rate that it orbits the Earth, so we only ever see one side of the Moon. The Sun is the largest, most massive object in our solar system, with a diameter of over 864,000 miles, and over 333,000 times the mass of Earth. Light can travel around the entire Earth in nearly 1/10 of a second, but light would take nearly 15 seconds to travel around the Sun. Even though that sounds big, the Sun is actually just an average-sized star. Other stars have been found that are over 1,700 times bigger than the Sun. Because the Sun is the most massive, the Sun is the center of the solar system, with all the planets and asteroids orbiting around it, hence the name solar system. The Sun is composed of hydrogen and helium and is held together by its own gravitational pull. In the center of the Sun, where hydrogen is fused to form helium, the temperature exceeds 25 million degrees Fahrenheit. Mercury is the first planet out from the Sun, and has the fastest orbit velocity of all the planets, making one complete orbit about every 3 months. Mercury is also the smallest planet, with a diameter of only 3,032 miles, just 870 miles bigger than the Moon. And at 364 quintillion tons, Mercury is also the planet with the lowest mass. Mercury is the only other terrestrial planet besides Earth to have a global magnetic field, so you'd probably get lost on all the others. Venus is a special planet for many reasons, one of which is that it's 7,521 miles, its diameter is just 405 miles smaller than Earth's. It's also the only planet that spins backwards, at least sort of. Technically Uranus spins backwards too, but we'll get to that later. Another thing that makes Venus special is that it is the third brightest object in the sky, with only the Sun and Moon brighter than it. In fact, on a clear night with no ambient light, such as the Moon, Venus is actually bright enough to cast shadows. Even though Venus has a size similar to Earth, because it's closer to the Sun, it has a faster orbit velocity than Earth. It's not quite as fast as Mercury though. Instead, Venus takes a little over 7 months to orbit the Sun. Venus is also very warm, with temperatures exceeding 850 degrees Fahrenheit, the hottest temperatures of all the planets. Even more special than Venus is Earth. Earth is the only planet designed to support life, and due to the Earth's large amount of water, which covers over 70% of its surface, the Earth has often been referred to as the blue marble. Earth is the largest of the 4 terrestrial planets, with a diameter of 7,926 miles, which, though it sounds big, is nearly invisible when compared to the Sun. Speaking of the Sun, remember that light that could travel around the Sun in 15 seconds? Well, for it to travel from the Sun to Earth takes 8 minutes and 20 seconds. And here's an interesting fact. If sunlight takes 8 minutes and 20 seconds to reach Earth, every time you look at the Sun, you are looking 8 minutes and 20 seconds back in time. Quite fascinating, though I wouldn't recommend doing it for very long. Not surprisingly, Earth takes 365 days to orbit the Sun. It's 66,600 miles per hour. That is one fast ride. As the third planet from the Sun, we are already 93 million miles away, and we still have 5 planets to go. Mars is the last terrestrial planet, and is also the second smallest planet with a diameter of only 4,221 miles. But its small size doesn't prevent it from having both the largest canyon and largest mountain in the entire solar system. Valles Marineris, the largest canyon, is long enough to stretch across the entire continental US and is nearly 4 times deeper than the Grand Canyon. Olympus Mons, the largest mountain, is 3 times taller than Mount Everest and has a base as large as the state of Arizona. Mercury and Venus have no moons, but Mars has 2. Mars is also the planet with the closest day length to Earth, taking just 42 minutes longer to make one rotation around its axis. It also has a fairly similar orbit velocity, though the orbit velocity of Venus is technically closer to Earth's orbit velocity. We're now transitioning from hot to cold. Mars has an average temperature of negative 85 degrees Fahrenheit. For comparison, the average on Earth is 59. The asteroid belt is not a planet, but is instead a belt of asteroids, just in case that needed to be clarified. The asteroid belt contains millions of asteroids and is about 92 million miles thick. Even though there's millions upon millions of asteroids, because the belt is spread out through a large area of space, if you were to stand on one asteroid, the asteroid next to you would be so far away that it'd be barely visible. The belt is positioned about 230 million miles from the Sun, between the orbit of Mars and Jupiter. We're now past the 4 terrestrial planets, and onto the 4 gas planets, which are often referred to as the gas giants, because they are massive. The first in the lineup is Jupiter, the largest of all the planets in the solar system, with a diameter of 88,846 miles. Jupiter is so massive that in technicality, it doesn't actually orbit the Sun. Rather, the Sun and Jupiter orbit a center point just above the surface of the Sun. Jupiter is more than double the mass of all the other planets in the solar system combined. Jupiter is the fastest spinning planet, making a full rotation in less than 10 hours, although it's not so fast orbiting the Sun, taking nearly 12 years to orbit the Sun. Jupiter is also very cold, with an average temperature of negative 166 degrees Fahrenheit. Saturn is the second largest planet in the solar system, with a diameter of 74,897 miles, and, not surprisingly, is also the second most massive. Although Saturn is the second most massive planet, it is also the planet with the lowest density. Saturn has such a low density that it could actually float, if you could find a container large enough to fit it in. Saturn is best known for its beautiful rings, which are composed of objects ranging in size from a grain of sand to an entire mountain. But even though there are huge objects in Saturn's rings, if the rings were scaled down to the diameter of Earth, they would be thinner than a single sheet of paper. Besides its rings, Saturn also has an astounding 82 moons, which is the highest number of natural satellites of all the planets. Like Jupiter, Saturn is very cold, with an average temperature of negative 220 degrees Fahrenheit. Saturn has been known for thousands of years, making it the farthest planet from the Sun that was discovered without the use of a telescope. With a diameter of 31,763 miles, Uranus is less than half the size of Saturn, but is still 4 times larger than Earth. Uranus is also only about 15% the mass of Saturn, but is still 15 times more massive than Earth. Unlike Saturn, which was discovered without the use of a telescope, Uranus was the first planet discovered with the aid of a telescope. It was discovered in 1781 by astronomer William Herschel, although he originally thought it was either a comet or a star. Uranus takes over 80 years to orbit the Sun, although it doesn't orbit quite like all the other planets. While all the other planets orbit the Sun like a spinning top, Uranus rolls around the Sun like a ball. Since it orbits in this way, it actually spins clockwise, the same direction as Venus, which is opposite of all the other planets. The average temperature on Uranus is negative 320 degrees Fahrenheit, although that's not why it's blue. Uranus is actually blue because Neptune is blue. Well, not really, but it is for the same reason. Because of all the methane gas in their atmosphere, most of the red light is absorbed, causing the blue color. Speaking of Neptune, at about 2.8 billion miles, Neptune is the farthest planet from the Sun. At this amazing distance, Neptune takes over 160 years to orbit the Sun. Because it's so far from the Sun, broad daylight on Neptune would appear more like dim twilight to us. Noon on Earth is about 900 times brighter than noon on Neptune. At 30,775 miles in diameter, Neptune is the smallest gas planet, but that doesn't make it docile. Neptune has the strongest winds in the solar system, blowing at over 1,200 miles per hour. That's literally Mach 1.5, faster than the speed of sound. The average temperature on Neptune is negative 330 degrees Fahrenheit, exactly 10 degrees colder than Uranus. Although that sounds cold, Triton, one of Neptune's moons, is one of the coldest objects in the solar system, with temperatures falling below negative 390 degrees Fahrenheit. That's colder than liquid nitrogen. Although Neptune is the farthest planet, there's still more to the solar system, like the 5 dwarf planets, which aren't classed with all the others since they're too small to keep their orbit clear of other objects. But whatever the case, all these planets, dwarf planets, and asteroids orbit the Sun, creating our solar system and the Milky Way galaxy.